This is going to be your guide for getting the best armor in New World Aeternum. Now, if you're watching this video, you probably just started or you haven't played in a while, so you really want to know what the best perks are. I'm not just going to say, hey, here's an in-game loadout, go for that. There's a couple of different things that you want to focus on, especially in the early game where you're only allowed 1 or 2 perks on armor. So to get an idea of early game gear, let's take a look at faction equipment, because it's really good at explaining the gear system, because there's different weight values that affect how your character operates, and then you can use this gear to upgrade into the best possible equipment for your character, and it's super cheap, super affordable. You do a couple of faction missions, and then you can buy whatever you want. You can also use the seals to get the stats that you want on that gear. So check this out. Depending on the weight of your armor, you're going to have different armor values as well as different benefits depending on your equip load. So if you have a light equip load, you get an awesome dodge roll, you get more outgoing healing, which is great as a healer class, and you also do 15% more damage, but there are drawbacks. You're going to be taking a lot more damage since you're in lighter armor. You're going to have longer CC duration, less block stability, and also you can't run for longer after getting hit. Medium is just perfectly balanced, and you get a nice little hop dodge. And then heavy, you're a tank. You're not dodging anything, but you have more block stability, you don't take as much CC, you deal less damage, and then you also don't really... Like, tank healer ain't that great because you have less outgoing healing, and then you're going to have to get different gear to get the desired equip load, and there's a mix and match to it. So if you're going heavy, just get heavy everything, that way you have the fattest armor rating. If you want a medium equip load, which is generally going to be the best all-rounder equip load unless you're ranged or healer, you want light pants and then a mix of heavy and medium other gear. That's going to give you some optimizations, and then you're allowed like 1 piece or 2 piece of medium equipment for a light equip load. And this is really important. Pay attention to this, but it's also why using the faction gear is really awesome, because whatever equip load you want, you can buy medium gear, you can buy light gear, and then you can buy heavy gear. Comes with an empty gem socket, so you can just kind of put in whatever little gem you want for a couple of extra stats. And then you also get the health perk, which is good in the beginning of the game, but falls off late and becomes trash. So you kind of just want this as like starting gear if there's nothing better on the market, just to kind of get your first, okay, I can kind of deal with everything, it's solid equipment, and depending on how the trading post is going, maybe other things are too expensive or not really listed on the marketplace. Purple gear is going to have 2 perks. When it comes to faction gear, you get refreshing, but refreshing caps out at 4, so you don't want 5 pieces of faction gear. Again, it's just kind of like a nice little upgrade depending on the gear score, depending on the cost of things. Starts getting a little expensive, especially on the faction tokens, so yeah, might not be worth going for this stuff. Unless like you're super baller and you have no other way of getting like almost 700 plus gear score, then this is pretty good, because now we see the enchanted ward, and this is the must-have on equipment. Which brings us back to my inventory and all these pieces of armor I have to kind of give examples of how you can build a good gear set. Now, reading some of these sounds crazy. We have elemental aversion. You just take less damage from elemental attacks. Same thing for physical aversion on range. And then enchanted ward. So just regular hits do a significant amount less damage. I want all of that on a piece of gear. Done. Well, you can't have that because there's exclusivity. So enchanted ward, the aversions, as well as grit ward, which is just flat damage reduction while under the effects of grit. And there's many different ways of getting grit. That I have the battle axe perk that just gives me grit on heavy attacks. You also get it on certain abilities, so when my character has like that white outline, it shows that I have grit. Depending on your stat points, you can also spec into grit, so 300 constitution gives you grit on basic melee attacks. However, you can see it's like not permanently active when I have it on the axe, that I actually need to start the attack, and then I gain grit. So it's not like, oh, I'm just going to be swinging, have perma grit forever, and then that's just like flat damage reduction against everything, which means you do have to kind of get some trade-offs, and I think grit ward is cool, but it's not like an all-rounding, always thing. It's kind of situational, which means you just want enchanted ward. If you get enchanted ward on something and it has the stats that you want, it's now an upgrade. Next up, we have conditioning, which gives you damage reduction after getting hit that lasts for a couple of seconds. However, it kinda sucks. It's useful, and you can have it on armor, but it kinda sucks because it doesn't refresh. So if I get hit with a thrust attack, that first hit isn't going to have the damage reduction, and then if I get hit by another one, it doesn't refresh it, so I don't have it permanently, which means there is going to be some downtime. That's kind of weird. Then I have to get hit again for it to activate. I'm not going to be getting the damage reduction on the reactivating hit, so that's kind of weird. However, it does stack. So if you have like multiple of these and the primary enemy type is going to be like attacking with that, you can still have a crazy amount of damage reduction. Now, flame conditioning is really good because if you get burned, it's going to tick with the afterburn and then refresh your flame conditioning, so you can use that to stack. And elemental aversion flame conditioning, it's like, okay, cool, now I don't have to worry about magic attacks. And then depending on the situation, flame conditioning plus enchanted ward sounds really good, but seems to be a rare perk combo. So yeah, conditioning, it's aight. But now let's talk about health and why it's bad. So if we look at my character, I have 16,785 health, and then with this 687 gear score boots, it gives me 2.4% max health. Well, it's going to be base health, which means if I take off these boots, I only lose like 300 and something health out of my 16,000 pool. Health is good for not getting one shot, but the thing is, if you're getting one shot, having a couple percent more health isn't really going to change that one shot because it's a mechanic that's meant to do a crazy amount of damage to you, and there's a lot of healing and sustain inside of New World, so as long as you're keeping your active health pool up and staying close to maxed out and not getting one shot, you don't really need that much more health, especially if you're optimizing other things through the ward and just having a really good gear loadout. So it's worth paying attention to the primary enemies that you're going up against. This guy's a spear, these guys have strike weapons. If you're going up against an animal, they're usually going to be strike. So if I have like thrust ward and strike ward, it's going to be really good for this area, which means if I'm doing like massive farming runs or chest gathering, that's the armor I want to have for my gear. And if that's most of the content I'm engaging with, then yeah, that's what I want. So then we can just kind of demo a little bit right here where I get in there, I spin around, I'm healing, the health doesn't matter, my gear is awesome, I heal up a lot, I can weapon swap, and then I can just kind of combo out however I want to. See, it just kind of shows like, oh yeah, when you have your weapons, when you have your gear, when you have what you're playing for, then you can just kind of focus on that. But overall, health really ain't it. Conditioning, you can have some conditioning. You can also have different loadouts in your gear set or inventory depending on the areas that you commonly farm. So if you have thrust conditioning, enchanted ward, luck, or some kind of other perk, yeah, that's going to be good for certain situations, and it's worth holding on to or selling for a lot of money. Which brings us to talking about luck. So luck doesn't have any combat stats, however, it's going to give you better drop rates from enemies as well as from looting chests. So you really want to have a gear set of all the luck items you can get, put pearls in them, and then you're going to be getting a chance at some crazy rare drops. A purple enchanted luck is going to be better than any other luck legendary unless it also has enchanted, but then at that case you can just sell it for crazy amounts of money instead of binding it to you. But if you don't sell it and you use it and it makes combat better, then that means you're getting a better chance at dropping gear that could also have enchanted ward luck. In my experience, it's worth speccing into luck and having a luck gear loadout. Also, there's a post from an Amazon Games employee that says if you have shield and sword, it's actually going to work when looting chests, so you can have luck with the pearl, get extra luck on the shield. So even if you're not playing tank, you do want a shield loadout, and then you can just kind of use this to farm enemies, pop on over to your shield when you loot a chest, and that's going to give you the best looting luck. But wait, there's more, because there's also harnessing perks, which give you damage to elemental attacks, which is huge if you're using something that has a primary element like a fire staff. Also, when people run range weapons, they usually have an attunement perk that deals elemental damage, and you can also socket a gem into your weapon to convert some of the damage into an elemental attack, which means you can actually just get a boost on any weapon by having harnessing and then putting a gem into that. Certain enemy classes are going to be weak to certain elements, so if you're going to be doing a lot of fighting against Angry Earth, well, you want a battle axe, you want to put a ruby in it, that way you get fire damage, and then you want fire harnessing perks on your weapon, and you're just doing insane amounts of DPS. Then there's also super niche stuff, so we have artifacts like the Abyss, which convert your damage into Abyssal. So instead of doing slash damage with a Great Axe, I'm doing Abyssal, so I can get almost pretty much full value at 99% out of the Void Harnessing and anything else that increases my Void damage. And there's even more stuff you can put on your armor because every ability has a perk that can buff it. So we have Fortifying Whirlwind. Whirlwind gives you Fortify and slash damage. That's really good. You want that on armor or you want it somewhere. Same thing for Insatiable Gravity Well being one of the best perks in the game because you heal from Gravity Well damage and then you also get a burst of extra damage. So it's DPS sustain. Yeah, you really want that. That's where you might have to consider some trade-offs depending on how difficult it is to get this gear. That, yeah, I had to take freedom because void damage, when Insatiable Gravity Well does void, and then I also need it for my gear set. Yeah, sure, I'll take freedom because getting Enchanted Ward or something else with that is going to be almost impossible. Or if you want to be more tanky, then I go Insatiable Gravity Well, Enchanted Ward, and then whatever other perk you can take instead of Void Harnessing. Now, you don't need every perk for every ability that you have. You can read the ability and just kind of go, that's kind of bad. Okay, fine, maybe I want it. And also, you can put the perk onto a weapon for a greater effect. That's not going to be usable in most cases. So my Blunderbuss for PvP has a weapon perk, and you can also see I put in an Amethyst, which gives me Sighted Abyssal, which then converts some of my damage. So if I have Abyssal gear, that's just going to be better for everything, but then you can look at some other weapons where it's like, well, I want crit chance, I want crit bleed, and I also want to deal more damage on my attacks. So for my build, this is better than putting some kind of greatsword ability perk on my weapon, since I only get 3 slots. If you have a cut gem, it tells you what it does if it's put into a weapon or armor, so cut opal is going to give me elemental damage absorption, and we can also see some other different things. That diamonds are really good because it gives you mostly physical, but a little bit of elemental, which is really nice. Since you're mostly going to be taking stray elemental attacks, this is mostly a PvE guide, but then you can also just kind of go with something like an onyx, and that gives you physical damage absorption. And if you're in PvP, people just kind of mix it up depending on what damage they're taking. That in PvP, ranged attacks deal thrust damage, but in PvE, they don't. So that's why thrust is also kind of crap in PvE, because if I get hit with an arrow from a skeleton, I'm actually not getting thrust conditioning. I'm going to need the physical aversion. But in PvP, it's just going to be reducing the thrust damage. I also have an opal, that way I'm getting elemental. I have physical ward, and then you can also just kind of put in some other stuff. Slash damage absorption. You don't want someone coming in and finishing you off with a sword. And we haven't even talked about jewelry yet, so you want health on your jewelry, that you just get a ton of flat health. That's a good place to put it. Gives you a little bit extra on that base. It's also mostly a free slot, and it's a lot more significant, so yeah, that is worth 1,000 health, which means it's worth having. And then Divine gives you incoming healing effects, but also depending on the class, you want outgoing healing effects, and you can find that on rings. There's going to be the protection perk, so you have like slash protection, flame protection, all of that stuff. That's something you can have on an amulet. And then Alchemist Reprieve is just busted, where you get improved healing effects by 10%. Also, cool thing about Divine, incoming healing includes your own lifesteal. So healers are healing you, your drain and sustain effects are also going to be healing you, also your abilities that give you like lifesteal effects, that's going to be really nice. So yeah, this is pretty much what you want on an amulet. Rings get kind of spicy, and it's more for like a weapon guide, which I'm going to do a video on, which may or may not be out when you're watching this video, because the damage types are exclusive. So you can't have keen awareness for the critical chance plus some kind of damage modifier. Now, because of how critical damage works, it's not going to be doubling like you might expect from some kind of other game. The weapons are going to have base critical chance, and then it's going to be like 20%, 30% more damage. So 7% chance to get 30% more damage. Yeah, you just always have the flat damage if you're going for it. However, some effects are going to proc off of crit, so you might just want like the keen awareness for the crit over this, and then everything is going to crit. But if you're running 2 slash weapons, then yeah, just take the slash damage. Then you pretty much always want leeching if you're going to be offensive. And as a healer or life staff, it's also pretty obvious where you want to go healing. You want to have healing breeze or purifying. And then if you're running something like a fire staff, burning. Bloodletting, keen awareness, and then leeching on a keenly jagged weapon. That can have synergy. Also, this opens up luck, so if you're just running your leeching ring with some kind of damage modifier and luck, that's great for PvE. Maybe it's also a place to put refreshing on. And then you get like a little bit of refreshing that isn't taking away from your armor, and that's how you find 2 to 3 refreshing somewhere in your build. And then that brings us to the earrings, where you want regenerating. Just flat health every second. This is also a good place to have refreshing, and then consumables cooling down. That's kind of like the only place you can get it. So these are mostly like the free slots on an earring that give you really good combat stuff. And then, like I said, refreshing, if you have it, you can just kind of put it somewhere. A lot of people like going 4 out of 4 and just spamming abilities, but for the most part, you don't need to. So depending on your abilities, they usually have really long cooldowns. So it's like, oh, I have a 30-second base cooldown. If I have 4 refreshing perks, it's only going to give like an extra second or so off the cooldown. But if you can like find 1, 2, maybe 3 in your equipment, that's going to be good. You don't have to worry about maxing out the refreshing. I think that's overrated. Some people are going to say that's a hot take, but I'd rather just have damage or more damage absorption or just any other stat than 1 second off of a cooldown. Hopefully, that's everything about gear and equipment. That health is good in the beginning of the game, it becomes overrated. Same thing on refreshing, except I think refreshing is always overrated. Enchanted ward, just get that. Grit ward is situational, conditioning is decent, and then you also just kind of want to have other perks that are going to augment whatever style you're going for, and then luck is OP. You can use generic gemstones, just kind of round out your build, and I hope that's everything. Hope you guys enjoy the video. Hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.